Hi, it's Cara and today we're doing my February wrap-up. This month I read 16 books. Most of them were novels. 12 of them were things that were physical reads that were on my TBR or would have contributed to my physical TBR. And that's about it. Quite a few were audiobooks too, so let's get started. So the first thing, we'll go from first to last in order I read them. First thing I read at the start of the month was Grey Sister by Mark Lawrence. This is the, I'm playing with my tripod again. This is the second book in the Book of the Ancestor trilogy. The third one comes out in March. You would not believe how excited I am. And this follows Nona as a teenager at the Convent of Sweet Mercy. The first one starts as when she's a child and Nona kind of has some dark powers, and this world is essentially like ours except the sun no longer shines, I believe. Like the sun basically doesn't exist anymore, and instead like the ancient people to this world, like so far back that no one, it's like mythical, attached some kind of device to the moon that reflects this weak sun's gaze, like the rays from this weak sun, and clears a strip of ice around the equator, and that's where everyone lives. But it's starting to fail, so they've got some things going on. So it's a bit science fiction, a bit fantasy, and it is so good. I rated Grey Sister 4.5 stars. I think it loses a star, half a star for me, because it kind of just chucks you in, and like there's a like story so far right at the start, but then in the story so far there's a thing like, you'll have questions about this one character. It's fine, you haven't met them yet, you're meant to have questions. And I'm like, like the pressure is so real. So I was confused a bit of the way through this, but I overall really enjoyed it, though it was ages ago, so there was probably something else that I mentioned in my actual review. If you want to look at my kind of real-time thoughts on any of these, because I post my Goodreads reviews like almost immediately after I finish them, like in the next day or so. Definitely check those out. I'll have them all linked down below. I'm making a real effort to do Goodreads reviews for everything I read this year, so if you ever want to check out my in-depth thoughts, check out my Goodreads review. So 4.5 stars for Grey Sister. Then I read The Red Threads of Fortune by Ji Yang, which is book 2 in the Tenseret saga. These are a series of novellas set in a silk punk world. I gave this 3.5 stars. I thought it was really interesting. Though as in a lot of novellas, it's a bit hard to connect to the characters, and there was a big time jump between book 1 and book 2. But I did enjoy it, and I'm keen to continue on with the series. Then on audiobook, I read Wild Beauty by Anna Marie McLemore. This is about a family of cousins, technically, though they kind of act like sisters. That it's like this generational family that every generation there's 5 girls, like no men, and they grow flowers from the ground in this area. And it's kind of an exploration of family, ecological disaster, morals, ethics. It's complicated, but really good. I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4.5 stars. I just had a great time listening to it. The audiobook narration was amazing. I would definitely recommend this, and if you're having trouble reading the physical copy, definitely check out the ebook, it's great. Then I read Bound by Mark Lawrence, which is a short, kind of like fan service novella that takes place between Grey Sister and the sequel that's coming out in March, Holy Sister. It's kind of just a kissing story. It does kind of serve some plot in that it kind of develops a few character tensions. And I guess one thing about that whole series is it kind of jumps a lot of things, and you're expected to just get where the characters are now at the start of this. Like the gap between book 1 and book 2 was a big jump of like 3 years. And you've got to just kind of keep up, but it assumes dynamics have changed because the dynamics change over 3 years. And this is kind of a good little bridge between the two, I think, because we got to see some dynamic shifts that I assume when we come into book 3 will be important. And it was just fun and kind of laid some groundwork for some things that were hinted at already. People who said they don't like much romance enjoyed this little kissing story because it comes really naturally as part of the story. Really enjoyed it. keen to see how the kissing develops in book 3. I gave it 3.75 stars. Then I read The Vanishing Stare by Maureen Johnson. This is book 2 in the Truly Devious series. This is a murder mystery contemporary series. We follow Stevie, who attends this fancy weird boarding school where they're all kind of pushed to pursue their own like passions. Her passion is detective work, and there was this cold case that happened years back. I'm the developer of the school. His wife and daughter were kidnapped and held for ransom, and then the wife turns up dead and the daughter's still missing, like 50 years later. So this kind of follows that, and the only real downside I think this series has is that the mystery component is spread over all 3 books. So at each stage you kind of find out something new at the conclusion, but you don't know the whole story, which is a little bit to this book's detriment because you're building up for so long, but then there's not as strong a payoff as I think standalone mysteries have. And often big mystery writers, each book will be its own contained mystery, so you feel the payoff. I think this is a series that will improve on reread when the whole series is out and you can go back and see how all the threads tie together. I gave The Vanishing Stare 4 stars. Then I read Pre-Incarnate by Sean McAuliffe, which I also gave 4 stars, but a very different 4 stars. Pre-Incarnate is a time-twisty novella comedy on the reins along the same lines as Terry Pratchett's science books. If you've ever read those, he's got some time travel-y science books. There's a lot of footnotes and nonsensical things. It's weird. Ben Elton's book Before Time, or what's it called? What's that book called? I can't remember. Ben Elton has a time travel book that I've read. And it has similar themes to this, but this is so weird and so out there. Like, it's nuts. I don't know how to describe it. But I had a fun time reading it, so I gave it 4 stars. It's literally so messed up. Though I did like the references to Tom Cruise, Matthew Riley was hilarious. It was great. Like, would totally recommend this. But you've got to be the right kind of person. I think the Australian humour is really strong in this. Then, for the first time in like years, I have a book I DNF'd. Yeah. I was listening to it on audiobook too, which I was really surprised with because I think on audio I'm way more likely to push through. But I was finding I just didn't even want to listen to this. I was finding every excuse not to put it on. And I listen to audiobooks commuting. So really there's not much else to do. Like, I could listen to music or something. But lately all I've been doing is listening to audiobooks. But I was making every effort not to listen to this. And that was Grave Mercy by Robin Lefevre. I have this whole series. I won't have it much longer. I'm going to unhaul it. This is the His Fair Assassin trilogy, and I wanted this to be kick-ass and assassin-y. And it's really, they're like assassin nuns, very similar to the Grey Sister, Red Sister, Grey Sister, in France, and it's got very similar themes. She's like taken into this monastery, and she's a nun, but she's gotta like assassinate people. But like no assassinating really happened, and it's really just a romance, and even the romance wasn't good. I just wasn't attached to the characters. I couldn't even remember her name half the time. I think it's Evane or something like that, but it's in first person. Isme. Like, maybe if I read this in a physical form, I could maybe have gotten better than that, only because it has like a dramatis personae at the start. So I would have known that her name was Isme, but I could never remember that. And I just, it was just really hard for me to get into. It also hasn't aged well. It's first person narration. And it just was really not for me right now. Not at this point in my life. I think I would have really enjoyed it at the time it came out, when it was kind of like very part and parcel. It came out in 2012. Yeah, it's very 2012 YA. I just couldn't get behind it, and I felt really bad because I so wanted to love this, and I was in Struggle Town. I DNF'd it at like, how far would I have gotten? Maybe 150-ish pages. I was struggling so hard, and I was like, it was 2 weeks into the month and this was all I'd been reading on audiobook. I can normally get through an audiobook in like 5 days or less, which is proven by some of the ones I got through later in the month, and I was still stuck on this and I barely started and I just couldn't hack it anymore. I gave up. I'm not going to try and read it on physical either. I can't be bothered. Other people will probably love this. I'm sure it has merits if you're the right kind of person. I'm not the right audience for this at the moment. Then you might have noticed in January I read a quarter of City of Bones as part of a reread where I'm annotating. Oh, my kitten's playing with my foot. And this month I read the second quarter, so I'm now halfway through City of Bones. I'm going to film all my annotations once I've completed this, so look out for that in like a couple of months. I will be reading the third section in March. Then I read, finally, The Language of Thorns by Leigh Bardugo. I've had this on my shelf a while. It's a collection of short stories set in the Grishaverse. Everyone loves it. I loved it. It was so good. So good. Each of the stories are super dark, and they have these like illustrations, which I love. Love the illustrations. Let me find a full page one. Like, oh, look at them. They're all done in this blue and red tone and they're so good. I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4.25 stars. There were some stories I liked better than others, but overall it was really solid. Then I read another Anna Marie McLemore book, and that is Blanca y Roja by Anna Marie McLemore. Oh my god. This follows the two sisters, Blanca and Roja, and they're in their family, every generation 2 girls are born and one is destined to be taken by the swans, and everyone thinks it's Roja and she's like, nope. She also thinks it's going to be her, but Blanca's convinced she's going to be able to change their fate, and either mean they can both survive, or if that's not the case, she's gonna go. It is beautiful. I don't think I liked it quite as much as Wild Beauty. I ended up giving this a 4 stars. I just think the voices of Blanca and Roja are very similar, especially in the first half of the book, which I think was intentional, but it made it really hard to distinguish them. And I was reading this in a physical form. And the people that I cared about most and really got me invested in the story weren't the two sisters. It was their love interests. Paige, who's a trans boy who has an interesting gender discussion around pronouns, because he's happy to use both he and she pronouns and would kind of like them both used, but a lot of people in his life, like his parents, can't comprehend that he's happy to be called she, but he's not a girl. And then Yearling, who is from a big like family in town and is having a lot of problems with his family dynamics. I cared so much more about Paige and Yearling than I cared about the sisters, especially at first, and the kind of drive to love the story was more in them, though by the end I really cared about the sisters, but the boys were way more interesting to me. I gave this 4 stars. We have Heartstopper Volume 1 by Alice Oseman. This is a graphic novel following Charlie and Nick, who are characters from Solitaire. Love Solitaire, love Charlie and Nick, they're adorable. This is awesome. I have read like a small part of this before on the webcomic, but I hadn't read the full thing, and there's going to be a volume 2 obviously, but I hadn't read all of what was in here and I just loved it. I really love it. They're so sweet. And Charlie speaks to me in a particular way. I love them so much. I gave this 4.5 stars. It was beautiful. Then I read another audiobook, and this I like slammed through in like 2 days, and that is Scarlet by Marissa Meyer. This is the second book in the Lunar Chronicles, which I've been reading on audiobook. This follows Cinder from the first book and Scarlet. Obviously it's like a Red Riding Hood retelling in space, kind of in space, sci-fi. It was so good. I don't have any intention of buying the Lunar Chronicles because they're all available on audiobook from my library, but I totally recommend them, and I recommend the audiobooks. Rebecca Soler's amazing. I gave Scarlet a 4 stars, but like a good 4 stars. I really like it. Then I read Icefire by Crystal Lacey, and I gave this 3.5 stars. This is a middle grade fantasy with dragons. This is from my childhood, if you couldn't tell, because this came out ages ago. This is a long series. This was technically a reread for me, but I haven't read any further than this. I've read like half of book 3 and DNF'd it when I was like 12, but not in a I hated DNF, as in a I got busy and something else came out that I was like really excited for, because I was a terrible reader as a child. And I enjoyed this, but especially reading it as an adult. David, our main character, is so college boy. Like, this follows a college guy as the main character, even though this is middle grade, young adult, like young teens. David is a college guy, like a college kid. He's a bit of a dude, bro. Like, he's a nerd. Like, he's an absolute nerd. He's fascinated in the Arctic and geography. Like, he's a geography student. But he doesn't objectify the women in his life because he really cares about the women in his life. But there were like active scenes where he was commenting on her figure and like just some cringy stuff from David, and he makes some cringy decisions, and he's a bit really selfish. Like, he's boarding with a young girl and her mum. Like, her mum rents out this room to him. And he hasn't paid rent, like he's 2 weeks overdue in rent, and they kind of kick him out for a relative to come stay, and she finds him someplace to stay next door, like rent-free, and the next door neighbour has all these rules for him to follow as a lodger, and he doesn't like the rules, so he doesn't follow them. Like, oh god, you selfish man. But the dragons are just so cute. The dragons make this story. Lucy, the young girl, is adorable. I liked our like love interest female, Xana. She was great fun. And Lucy and her mum are amazing. But David is such an arsehole, but I think he's meant to be, so whatever. I will be continuing with this series in April. So I'm hoping to finish this whole series by the end of the year, so keep an eye out for those from me. Then another book I listened to on audio, but I do have a physical copy of this as well. This is 10,000 Skies Above You by Claudia Gray. I gave this 3.75 stars. I haven't read the first one in ages. I read it a couple of years ago. But I love these covers, so I own this whole series because these covers are stunning. And this is like a interdimensional travel series. I'm currently listening to the third and final one on audiobook, like as we speak. Not as we speak, but like it's my current audiobook read. I'm really enjoying it. I really like this series, but it's not amazing. So it got a 3.75 from me. I think my problem is like love triangles, this like destined to be together first person narration, which does work pretty alright in the audiobook, but it is very kind of like teeny. I don't know, it kind of just speaks like, I don't think it's aged well or super well, but it's fun. The stakes are pretty high, which I liked in this one. I have a feeling book 2 bored me because the stakes didn't feel super high, even though they should have. This one was better for that, or maybe the audiobook was better for that, not sure. But anyway, I enjoyed it. I'm reading book 3 at the moment, so obviously this is fine. And at one point I thought I might have like DNF'd this, like just wouldn't finish with this series and unhaul it, but we're getting through it and I'm enjoying it. 3.75. Then I read Blood Witch by Susan Dennard, which is book 3 in the Witchland saga. I have such mixed feelings about this because I care so much, but I also couldn't absolutely love it. I ended up giving it a 4.5 stars because by the time I like worked out all my categories in my Goodreads review, it equaled out to a 4.5 stars. I love the characters. I loved the plot. My biggest problem with this is the pacing. I found it really dense. And it doesn't help that this is like pretty long. It's like 500 and something, no, like 400 and something pages, like 450, and the text is tiny. And when we jump back and forwards between different perspectives pretty fast, it should be fast moving, but you kind of get jumped to the next story before you get a chance to really get invested. It didn't take me too long to finish, but I had to kind of work to finish it rather than it being effortless. Yeah. It's still 4.5 stars because all the like solid things that there's nothing I can really, I don't hate it at all. I love the characters. I really enjoy the plot. It's really complex. It's an interesting world. But yeah, the pacing was a little off. I had to really work to finish it, which is really my only problem. So I would recommend, if you're a bit hesitant on this series and pacing's a real big issue for you, maybe steer clear, but it's really good at the same time. Like, it's good. Then I read Reign of the Fallen by Sarah Glenn Marsh, which is book 1 in a duology. This was a 3.75 for me. I enjoyed it, but I didn't love it. This is, I think it's the first person narration for this, because I was listening to it on an audiobook. It was fine, but it was a bit nah. Like, I struggled a little. I didn't hate it by any means, but I didn't absolutely love it. I enjoyed Odessa as a main character. She was interesting. She had a lot going on. There's some topics of addiction and stuff. This kind of follows a bunch of necromancers in this fantasy world where the king and all the courtiers and everything are all dead, reincarnated people. But things start to go a bit wrong. This has, yeah, addiction themes, queer romance, though I think that will play in more in book 2. All around diverse, interesting. I really wanted a bit more diversity from the world as a whole, especially like in cultural aspects, like LGBT, good, but hopefully in book 2 we'll get some more diverse cultures, because it's kind of explained in the first one that we're in this world that doesn't really associate with outsiders. So I think that will expand more in book 2, but the magic system was really interesting. I also think the pacing was a little weird. It was like a series of short events happening consecutively that without a strong broad arc from start to finish. It was kind of like this problem and then it's solved, and then here's another problem and it's solved. And also the first bit was kind of boring until things, like once the first problem was solved, then things got interesting, but until then I was bored. So yeah, mixed feelings about it. I gave it a 3.75. I enjoyed it, and I will continue on with the series, but I wasn't like blown away. And then to finish off the month, and I only finished this last night, it's now the 1st, so it just crept in. I read Two Dark Reigns by Kenda Blake. This is the 3rd book in the Three Dark Crowns series. I have feelings. I gave this a 4 stars. I love the characters, like I'm so invested now. I think the world is super interesting, and it really kind of expanded in this one. The historical, cultural things to this world are super interesting. It is slow, so if that's a problem for you, be warned. Though it does, like, the pages go by fast, but you also, not much happens, kind of slow. And one thing I do really love about this series is that from the start to the end of every book, everyone's allegiances and who your allegiances to changes, and I really love that. So like, the kind of basic premise is that there's these triplets that are born, every generation of queens is 3 triplets, and they fight to the death for one of them to be crowned queen to then have the next generation of triplets, so on and so forth. We follow these 3 triplets, Mirabella, Arsinoe, and Catherine. And there's all these different like gifts on the island they live on. So Arsinoe is a naturalist, which means she can like guide animals and like have a familiar. Catherine's a poisoner, which means she can ingest poisons without dying. And Mirabella is an elemental, so she can like control fire and water and stuff. And yeah, the allegiances and things are so interesting. I really enjoyed it. I'm definitely keen to pick up book 4, but I was so hesitant to start this. Like, I just couldn't find the drive to pick it up, and I'm worried that might happen again with book 4, but we will see. So those are all the books, they're here now, that I read in the month of February. I was pretty happy with myself considering February was a short month. I'm hoping that my reading number will be a little higher in March, but I do have some big books on my TBR as well. Thank you so much for watching what will inevitably be a long video. Comment down below what books you read in the month of February, or link me to your wrap-up video if you have one, and otherwise I will see you soon with another video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!